So the foundation that we tried to lay last week is that the opposite of truth is false and that truth is undeniable. So, and one of the reasons it's undeniable is the person who says there is no truth, what question can we ask them?
Is that true?
Is that true that there is no truth? And if that's true, then there is a truth. So it's actually what's called a self-defeating statement. It defeats itself. It'd be like me saying, I can't speak a word in English. Now, one of my favorite movies, I think it's from like 2006, called Sahara. It's got Matthew McConaughey in it, and it's based on the novel by Clive Cussler. And in one of the scenes there, Matthew McConaughey's riding in his boat down a river, and a bunch of military troops are pursuing him, and he stops, pulls over for them, and they're like, pull over, we want to know where the doctor is. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak any English. And they say, well, how could you say that? You just communicated to us in English. He says, the only thing I know how to say in English is I don't know how to say anything in English. Saying there is no truth has the same problem with this conversation and dialogue that Matthew McConaughey is having with the soldiers. And of course, that was enough to distract them, for them to be able to pull the trick they were going to pull on the soldiers in the movie. But that's the problem. Everybody who denies truth affirms there's at least that truth, that there is no truth. So it's self-defeating. So when I teach youth how to respond to this, you could ask the question, is that true? And then if they're still a little dense, not understanding how it's self-defeating, then you could always say, okay, if their statement is true, that there is no truth, then it's false. And if it's false, there is no truth, it's also false. Either way, it's false. No matter what, all roads lead to that proposition being false. And in fact, there's lots of truths that we know. From the time you're born, you start recognizing the difference between mom and not mom. And it's true that this is mom, and then when non-mom picks you up, you might be a little upset. And you start recognizing the distinctions between things. That's based on what's called the law of non-contradiction. Opposites are not the same. And last week we talked about anybody who denies the law of non-contradiction, they're making a self-defeating statement as well, because they're saying there's a difference between affirming it and denying it. You mean there's a difference between opposites? That's just what the law of non-contradiction says. So part of the reason we start with that starting point is so then when we get into, okay, then if it's really the case that God exists, then all atheisms and skepticisms and so forth that reject God's existence are false. Any non-Christianities are also false. We start with that. So this week we're going to be looking at what are these common questions we run into about God. And one of the popular things that circulate on the internet, especially with the new atheists, they really push this idea that, oh, why do you believe in your God rather than the flying spaghetti monster? Now, I don't know if you've seen any of this popular new atheism, but the flying spaghetti monster is all the rage for them. They think that really shuts you guys down, that you can't answer that question. So I try to continually bring this to my kids' attention when we're watching Marvel movies. Now, hopefully you all know what Marvel movies are, but if you're unaware of the Marvel franchise with Thanos and Loki and Thor, well, Loki and Thor are supposed to be Norse deities. So it'd be like the ancient Greek pantheon that you talk about in school with Zeus and Poseidon, all these. Well, the kids are getting that in their Percy Jackson series. But what you notice is there's a huge difference between the God of the Bible and these gods. How can we make the case that their gods are very limited? And that's what we're going to discuss today. How can we actually know these things? So last week, there were a couple people asking if there's any book for the class. There's a lot of really good books on responding to truth, but Paul Copan has a series. The first one in the series is That's True for You, But Not for Me, Deflating Slogans That Leave Christians Speechless. And we discussed some ways to go through that. His second one is called That's Just Your Interpretation, and he has a whole series on this. So we basically went through some of these one-line statements that people use to try to get you to stop doing evangelism. I like Paul Copan's series on this because what he does is in about 3 or 4 pages, he explains the slogan And then he gives you one-line responses and some of the problems with the slogan, and then one-line responses on how to respond to those things. For this week, my colleague Frank Turek, if you guys are familiar with Cross-Examine Ministries online, he does a lot of speaking. He and Dr. Geisler wrote a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. This is his book, I think it's from 2015, 2016, called Stealing from God. I really have enjoyed this book. And I was talking to Frank a couple years ago at a conference. I was like, I really like your new book. He's like, new book? I've written like 5 more since then. That thing's 7 or 8 years old. I was like, well, new to me. I just started reading it. I think it's so great. So I appreciate the work he did in Stealing from God. And basically it's how atheists borrow all these things they need in order to prove that God doesn't exist. It presupposes all these things that can only be the case if God exists. So this is a great book that I like. So either Dr. Geisler and Frank's book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, or Stealing from God. Stealing from God is the newer one. Here's some questions that I get from students. Does God exist? How do we know God exists? If we can't see God, why think that he exists? Should we only believe things that we can see? Who made God? Kids like to ask this. And if God exists, what's he like? Can God make a rock so big that he can't move it? Why does God allow evil? Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Can't Darwinism account for all life instead of God? So these are some of the main challenges. And I usually teach a 15-week course on this topic, and I'm going to try to get this information into your hands in 40 minutes. So hold on to your seats. We're going to go really fast through a lot of information. It's a good thing that I'm a speed talker. And I'm not a southerner, so I could speak a little more quickly. No, I'm just kidding. Just playing with you. Just because you speak a little more slowly doesn't mean you don't think quickly. Your minds are super fast. So we're going to try to touch on how to answer a lot of these questions and hopefully get into the structure, the framework. You guys have a piece of paper. If you don't want to write this down, that's totally okay. Some of it may be recorded. All of it may be recorded. We'll see if the camera dies and the video, the recording, whatever dies this week. Hopefully it doesn't. But there's a lot of great resources we have. So we have the truth, guys. Let's not be scared to proclaim that. And for those who do evangelism regularly, or if you don't, here's what I want you to realize. When you say, I don't know, to somebody who asks you a question you don't know, all you're admitting is you are not God. We're really safe to admit that. We're Christians. We don't think we're God. I don't know. That's a good question. And a lot of times when people are asking me questions and I'm sharing the faith with them, what I'll say is, that's a great question. Let me think about it, and we can talk about it at a future time, because that gives me another opportunity to share the faith with them in a couple weeks. I might actually know the answer right now, but I might feel there's some time constraint, or it takes us off too far. It's like, okay, well, that's really not related to what we should be talking about right now. So that's a really good question. Let me think about it. We could do research about it. We could reach out, but there's a huge network we have of Christian intellectuals who are at the top of their field in pretty much every area. Like, I can't think of an area where there's not a leading Christian thinker. So whether you're talking about astrophysics, biology, biochemistry, whatever the objection is that an atheist might bring up, we have a Christian response to it. And just because you don't know it right now doesn't mean it doesn't exist. All you're saying is you're not God. So don't allow that to hinder you from sharing Jesus with people. It's like, yeah. Oh, unless you can answer me right now, I'm not going to believe. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. You're assuming I'm God. That's not my view. I don't think I'm God, but there is a God that you should worship too, that I love, and I want you to know about him. So what are some of the reasons we could give? The intellectual reasons that atheists, who are intellectual atheists, have come to believe that God exists. You have non-Christians coming to these conclusions, as well as great Christian thinkers who make these cases. So even before the rise of Christian theology, you've got Plato and Aristotle who are making some of these arguments that There has to be only one God. Only one God exists. He's an unmoved mover. He's pure actuality. And you might be saying, what does pure actuality mean? Okay, so if I were to use this PowerPoint clicker, which whenever Daryl has something up, sometimes you'll see an extra little red thing pop up on the screen. The boys are like, do it, Dad. I'll be like, under that. And sometimes it doesn't reach far enough, but I'll be messing with Daryl's presentation during service sometimes because I'm like a child, so I just can't help it. Like, okay, let's see if Daryl notices. Oh, he doesn't notice. Daryl will be standing there, a little red thing on him. Daryl has the potential of having a laser on him, and he actually has it on him when I stick it on him with my PowerPoint clicker. Okay? So that idea of actuality and potentiality is one of the ways we explain what it changes. Okay? So what is change? Change is moving from a certain potential to actually another thing. Okay, so time is a measurement of change. So we use the terms as philosophers, potential and actuality, to explain motion, to explain change, to explain time. So time is simply the measurement of change. That's what time is. So as fun as the time travel movies are, hey, you're not really capturing what time is. You can't do that. Time is just the measurement of change. They're making it a substance in the movies that we can move between things. The way this helps us understand God is, what is it that we learn about the nature of God in Malachi? What about God? Can he change? No. In Malachi chapter 3, we find out, I, the Lord, do not change. In fact, not only does he not change, he cannot change, because he is pure act. He is perfection. To say he changes would be him moving from a state of not having some perfection to having that perfection. But God has every perfection. Does this make sense? He's what's called pure act. Now, Aristotle defended this way before any Christian theologians did. But as soon as the Christian theologians started seeing, now this is the idea of, in philosophy, it's called metaphysics. And that sounds like a really crazy word. If you look it up in the Borders bookstore or Barnes & Noble, if they still have those around, you go to the metaphysics section, all you're going to find is stuff on occultism. That's not what we mean by metaphysics. What we mean is a study beyond the physical. The study of physics is a study of matter and motion. So when you take your physics class, you're thinking, okay, your brother's walking at 4 miles an hour, you're standing on top of a building. When should you drop the water balloon to drop it on your brother's head? Stuttering the matter in motion, boom, explodes on him. That's physics. Metaphysics is a look at reality beyond the physical. And that's what we say about God. This also explains why God can't have a body. Because bodies are composed. Bodies move in space. So you go from being in one position to a different position. You could be over there, but you are actually here. You have the potential, though, to move over there. Now, I've actualized my potential to be here by moving here. That's not how God is. He doesn't have a physical body. Physical things are composed. What am I composed of? Parts. And if you're composed, then you can also do what? Decompose, meaning die. God is uncomposed. He's the uncomposed composer. He is pure act. Thus, he doesn't move from one place to another. Unlike a flying spaghetti monster. A flying spaghetti monster that the new atheists bring up has to fly from one part of the universe to another and one part of the galaxy to another. It moves. It couldn't be what Christians worship as God, because it has the potential to do all these things. Also, it couldn't be spaghetti, because spaghetti is also a material thing, which is composed, and God is uncomposed. He's not a material thing. Now, the implications for that affect the way we interpret the Bible, too. So when it has physical parts of God, God is walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Well, if he's walking, he must have legs. His eyes go to and fro. Does Does he have eyeballs? No, these are physical characteristics. So what do we say? As Christian theologians, we say, oh yeah, all these are anthropomorphisms. They're figures of speech. They're metaphors. So if I say, hey guys, it's raining cats and dogs out there, what goes into your mind? What do you think? Are you picturing cats and dogs falling out of the sky? We all recognize it's a figure of speech, right? Even in the South, you have that expression, right?
Yeah.
It means what?
It's raining hard.
Yeah, it's really raining hard. It's raining a lot right now. So we have those expressions, and that's one of the things that when Christian theologians read certain passages of the Bible, we say it's an anthropomorphism. It's a figure of speech. When God says to Abraham, sacrifice your son, and he gets up on the mountain, he's about to sacrifice his son, okay, and he provides the ram. And he says, oh, now I know. Oh, did God not know something? So he moved from potentially knowing it to actually knowing it? No, it's another anthropomorphism. It's a figure of speech. Who told you you were naked? That's a rhetorical question. God knew everything that had happened. It's not like all of a sudden, oh, God is relying on us. Oh, I really hope they do the right thing. God knows all these things. His knowledge doesn't change. He doesn't go from a state of not knowing to knowing, because that would introduce potentiality. Now also, here's another interesting thing. When I make these arguments for God's existence, what I want you to recognize is that there's a distinction between what's called an essentially ordered series and a non-essentially ordered series. And here's all that means. In an essentially ordered series, we'll use my remote control here. Well, I wonder if I have, is there anything, maybe I have a pen I could use for a sec? Oh yeah, let's go. Okay, I'm going to use this remote and I'm going to use this pen. All right, so some of you could see what I'm doing. I'll hold it up on here. So I'm using the pen to push the remote across my book, right? And because it's an essentially ordered series, the effect of the remote moving is simultaneously to me moving it with the pen in my hand. Does that make sense? In essentially ordered series, that means the cause and effect are happening at the exact same time. It's simultaneous. Here's the significance of that. In a non-essentially ordered series, that might be your offspring. So my kids, when I die, my kids are going to continue on, and they might have children, and then their children could have children, but I don't have to be around for my kids to continue to act. That's a non-essential series. In the essentially ordered series, the cause and the effect are simultaneous. They're happening at the exact same time. For the arguments for God's existence, the ones that talk about right now, the only reason you could be existing is because there's an essentially ordered series of something sustaining you in existence. That's an essentially ordered series for God's existence. Now that's kind of cool. That doesn't go back to the beginning of time, like, oh, you begot this person and that person begot this person going back, but then they could pass out of existence and the line could continue. That's with the horizontal arguments for God's existence, non-essentially ordered series. It still shows God exists, but the ones that show he's existing right now, and the atheists will bring this up, that he's simultaneously existing because you're existing and you don't account for your own existence, then there must be another being who exists by his very nature. And that's what we all know is God. This is also affirmed in Scripture. When you're reading in Exodus, God reveals himself to Moses as I am. I am who I am. I be, I exist. That's what it literally says there. Who is he? He's intrinsic existence. His very essence is to be, is to exist. All of us, we came into existence at a certain point in time. Most of you look 40 years ago or so. So around 40 years.
Thank you.
And for like the really young college students, like, do I look that old? for all those older people are like, 40, huh? Take that. I look pretty good. We recognize that we came into existence at a certain point in time. So if there were at a certain point in time, existence was added to your essence, and it's being kept in existence by something else, whose very nature is to be. And that's what everybody knows to be God. That's an essentially ordered series. So let's look at the argument from change. I've already given you a little preview of that. Everywhere you look, you see change. You see things moving. You see the time changing. You see the paper folding. You see words appearing on the paper as you write it. Changing things mean that they don't necessarily exist, because things are passing into being, or coming into being and passing out of being. It's called a substantial change. So the trees, they lose their leaves. Okay, this is an accidental change. But then we could chop down the tree. We could put it into the wood chopper and see all the wood chips come out. Okay, now that tree is no longer with us. That's a substantial change. Something else that exists must bring these into being. There can't be an infinity of existing things whose existence is dependent on another, accounting for the entire chain. So the chain, suppose we wanted to hang a chain in the garage or something like that. Or maybe from the pulpit. We'll hang a chain from the pulpit in there. And I say, okay, I have this chain. How can we hang it on the pulpit? And you say, oh, just give me another link. Okay. Well, now I put another link. Let's hang it on the pulpit. There needs to be something that suspends it from the pulpit. Just adding links would be like adding things who don't account for their own existence. We need something that can anchor it to the pulpit. Whatever that thing is, whatever the anchor is, that thing must account for the existence of the whole chain hanging on the pulpit. Does that make sense? So we would need maybe a nail to put on top of the pulpit to hang the chain on. But just getting links isn't going to help you. Or suppose you see a series of train cars going in front of you, and you never saw the beginning of it, and it's all moving. Now, what do you know about the train cars? Well, we know each one is moving, but none of them have their own independent reason for moving. There has to be something at the beginning of that train forcing it to move. That would be an essentially ordered series causing it to move. There has to be an engine that's causing all those cars to move. Anything that has come into existence is like one of those cars. They don't account for their own continue right now existence. And the way to think of existence is it continues to keep you running, moving, living. It's that moving car. What is keeping you in that situation? Right now, we have a continuous ordered series right here with the television set. And, well, not quite my computer, but I've got this hooked up because it's a high-power computer and it dies super fast. Now, if I unplugged my computer, it's got a little battery power. But if I unplug that TV, what's going to happen to the TV? Immediately goes out because it's an essentially ordered series. Electricity going into that TV, essentially ordered series. That's how our existence is. The only reason that we are in existence right now is God is sustaining you in existence. God couldn't be closer to everything that exists than he currently is. He's keeping everything in existence, whether you believe him or not. He wants you to trust him. He wants you to worship him. But he's keeping everything in existence because the essentially ordered series. Here's the problem with an infinite regress. The reason you can't have an infinite series that there's no first cause. It'd be like trying to jump out of a bottomless pit. Imagine that, jumping out of a bottomless pit. No, wait a second. How could you do that? Or what if there was an infinite distance between where we are today and Walmart? Could we ever reach Walmart if there was an actual infinite distance? Why would it be impossible to ever reach Walmart? Because you'd have to cross an infinite chasm, and there's no crossing an infinity. These are some of the reasons there couldn't be an infinite chain of also dependent beings accounting for all the dependent beings we have. Are you following me?
Sure are deep.
What's that?
I said you sure are deep.
Thank you.
This above 40 is not getting it all.
That's all right. I'll give you some lower stuff. I'm starting with the hard stuff, so everything else.
I just need a private class.
Okay, here's the horizontal form. Go ahead, Chris.
So can you give an example of what an atheist would say to start that conversation? Like
Usually,
they're coming in with.
they're giving Flying Spaghetti Monster. What I'm trying to introduce you to is we have a 2,000-year history with thousands of pages explaining this that they're unaware of. They don't even consider it. They make this really dumb argument about flying spaghetti monsters without having spent any time looking at the thousands and thousands of pages of advanced reasoning from scientific and philosophical perspective. And they're saying, oh, your God is no different than the flying. Why should you worship your God rather than the flying spaghetti monster? We've got a lot of great reasons as to why. I'm giving you some of those. Now, I'm going to give you easier to access things that you could say to the atheist if you can't remember all this reasoning. If you want to hear this again, you could, one of my acquaintances, his name is Tom Woods. You could look up on YouTube, "You're Not a Dummy for Believing in God." He's got it, and it's not you're not going to see a visual, it's just an audio recording. It's around 30 minutes. "You're not a dummy for believing in God." And he refutes the flying spaghetti monster. So his name is Tom Woods. And it's spelled just the way it sounds.
Yeah, it's not difficult.
"You're not a dummy for believing in God." I think that's a hilarious title. "You're not a dummy for believing in God." So if you want to hear it, and why we believe God is the way he is, and why there can't be more than one, and why there's no way God could be a flying spaghetti monster, it'll be a great review for you. Now I'm going to give you a bunch of other things that he doesn't say in there that are a lot easier to access, that you could just have in your pocket. But I wanted to start out with something that, okay, this is a little more advanced reasoning, but hopefully some of you are able to follow it. And in my on my website, bernardjmauser.com, you'll also find, I talk about the difference between the different arguments for God's existence, whether something is an essentially ordered series or accidentally ordered series too. So I have a little article, it's only a couple pages long on that too. With the horizontal cosmological argument, it says this: everything that begins to exist has the cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. And so this is why, although in a lot of Christian circles, they don't like Big Bang cosmology, when it was first proposed by Einstein and corroborated by Hoyle and some of the other leading astrophysicists in the 20th century who had atheistic tendencies, they did not like the Big Bang theory, because the science pointed to the fact that a finite time ago, all space and matter and time exploded in existence out of nothing. And so, what caused the explosion from nothing of everything that we see here? It begs the question. So either nothing caused it, well, nothing has no causal power. It's self-caused, but then you'd have to exist and not exist, which is a contradiction. So it can't be self-caused. So then, what's the third option? It's either nothing, it's self-caused, or uncaused. That sounds like God. They did not like the theistic implications of that. They didn't like. That points to a type of theism. And in "You're Not a Dummy for Believing in God," he explains also why there only has to be one God. It's impossible there's more than one God. Because to differ from another thing, there has to be some type of potential way to differ from that. Now wait a second, you're introducing potentiality into God, who has to be what? Pure act. So, anyways, the redshift, the cosmic background microwave radiation, the expanding universe, all of these point to the fact that there was a beginning. When that happened, now, a lot of my friends, they want to talk about the debate, which is an in-house debate between Christians, as to whether the earth and the universe is young or whether it's old. This is an in-house debate among Christians who love Jesus. And here's what I say for those who really fear that if you give them the 4 billion years that they want to propose for the beginning of their existence, that allows them to get Darwinism. It's still not enough time. And here's the example I use. Suppose my kids come down and they see on the table there an alphabet cereal spelled out, "Take out the garbage, love mom." It'd probably be take out the garbage. I'm at the Y. Love, mom. Working out the Y. Okay. Do you think my kids are gonna be like, oh man, somebody must have knocked over the box? There's no message there. Why would that be implausible? Because we know what?
There's no order to an explosion.
That's right. In an explosion with these natural processes, you're not going to have order.
Right.
Okay, so the example I use is suppose we take into an airplane at 2,000 feet all these little cutout letters, bags that we fill with piece of paper with cutout letters, and we dump it from 2,000 feet. What are the chances from 2,000 feet? Now, we could even say it's in a hurricane, allow all the natural processes that God could throw at it. Okay, go ahead. Wind, rain, lightning could hit all those pieces of paper. What are the chances it's going to form a coherent message on your front yard? There's really no chance. You find the same thing in the genetic order. There's no chance. So, okay, just give us more time. Okay, you want more time? I'll take it to 10,000 feet. Is there more chance that it's going to form a coherent message or less chance?
Less.
Less chance, exactly right. More time doesn't help the Darwinists who want to say, oh, if you just give us a couple more billion years. No, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you in the genetic level for the information. It doesn't help you get the stuff you need. They have no chance to produce what only God can make. So the second law of thermodynamics also plays a role. That's why we have to always tell our kids, clean your room. Clean your room. And you say, my brother's going to clean it. He did me wrong. You got to clean it. Everything is always running down. It's going from order to disorder. That applies across the board. It's the second law of thermodynamics. This is one of these unchanging laws. Darwinism is opposed to the second law of thermodynamics. The theory of Darwinism doesn't get off the ground to start with. Now, he does have some useful insights, but what he cannot do is explain away God. With the vertical cosmological argument, I've already introduced that to you. They're dependent beings who must get existence from elsewhere. That's us. We're dependent. We didn't always exist. So, and there's a time when we're going to die too. And so, because you have beings coming into existence and then passing out of existence, there must be a being who gives them existence, who himself is the uncaused cause. Here's what you'll really probably easily remember, the teleological argument, because it's a quick to note. All design implies a designer. There's great design, therefore there's a great designer. See, just necessarily follows. Design implies a designer. So suppose you're walking in the forest, you come across a really nice watch. What you're not thinking is, man, it's amazing how the wind and the rain and the snow and all the other forces created this watch. Nobody's going to think that. Everybody recognizes the design in the watch. Design entails that there's a designer. Here's a corollary, a second form of it, points to the information. Everybody's all about the DNA in modern science. And so you could just ask your atheist friend, don't you think there's DNA? Okay, how much information is in a gram of DNA? There's as much information in a gram of DNA as you find in the entire Library of Congress. Now, what would you think about this book being written with the information in it by natural processes? Natural processes don't give you information. And there's a language in your DNA that tells your body how to develop. It develops uniquely to you because of the information embedded in your DNA. And that's in every cell of your body. That's just mind-blowing how amazing God is and how he designed us. So design implies a designer. Information implies an informer, someone who gave that. And we find that all over the DNA of every living thing on the planet. What about the moral argument? Objective moral laws require a lawgiver. there are objective moral laws, there's a lawgiver. Okay, so what is this sign communicating on this picture?
Don't tease the alligators.
Don't tease the alligators. If you're racing your brother down a ramp, know at the end he's going to be eaten by an alligator. I don't know. I'm going to push him down.
Don't get
This sign is pointing to something, though. What you know is there's a mind behind that. It's actually communicating a message. Beware. If you want to tackle the alligator, this is the way to do it. Ride your wheelchair down the ramp. Now, if this was just a natural process that you saw this out, I don't know how you can turn that into but if it wasn't actually communicating something, so maybe the alphabet cereal example, you actually do spill alphabet cereal, or you spill Scrabble letters or something. And maybe, hey, look, two of the Scrabble letters landed together and it says go. Sorry, I gotta go. You just dropped it. It happens that G and O are in the general vicinity. There's no mind giving you that message. But what do we know? We feel constricted all the time by moral laws. And I had one of my students ask me this when I was teaching up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at Cardinal Stritch University, Catholic University up there. One of my students says, Dr. Mauser, why is it that I feel guilty sometimes and that all of us have a general sense of guilt? I say, well, you feel guilty because you are guilty. You're all guilty of breaking God's law. And you need Jesus. Really, thanks for introducing that in my philosophy class. We all recognize that. When you go into a store and you pay for everything and you walk out with your goods, you don't feel guilty because you've had a reasonable exchange. You think you're better off. You're happy leaving Walmart. They're happy with your money. You're happy with the rotisserie you got. Like, all right, wasn't my chicken. I didn't have to spend all the time doing everything. Thank you for the rotisserie, and Walmart's happy with their $7. We're happy about that. But when you walk out like, oh man, I forgot to pay for this. Let me go back in. Oh, that's all right, honey. I know you come back and pay. I go, okay, thanks. You guys are a lot more trusted in the South than we are up in the North. They're getting shot up there. And then they assured me they'd shoot me too if they saw me doing something really bad. But the reason we feel guilty when we walk out without having paid something is because we've broken a law. We recognize that moral law in our heart. And ultimately, the fact that we all recognize this law points to the fact there's a moral lawgiver who gives it and writes it on the heart. Romans 2 talks about that there's a law that the Gentiles have, who by their nature do the things that are written in the law because there's a law written on the heart. Romans 1 points to the fact of these cosmological arguments. In 1:18, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against the godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth, since what can be known about God is evident to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood from what has been made. When we see the DNA, when we see the order, the design in creation. And there's also different levels of order. So there's one level of order of how this is put together. That's one level of order. How a mousetrap is constructed. That's one level of order. The writing on the board there, Tom Woods, you're not a dummy for believing in God. There's an order to the letters there. Those letters can be configured in different ways. But the way they're configured, that's one level of order. But there's a second level of order, a higher level order, that gives it meaning. And so if I use the word board, B-O-A-R-D, or the word bow, B-O-W, what is the meaning of bow? Or what are the meanings of bow? What is the meaning of bark? Or the meanings of bark? See, it's the same material construction of the word, with having bark, B-A-R-K, but the meaning, which is a transcendent level, there's different meanings you assign to them. That's a higher level of order. That level of order is what you find in DNA that tells your body to go one way versus another. That higher level of order is an immaterial, transcendent order that can also only come from God. So you have these different levels of order they have to account for that they cannot in an atheistic worldview, in a non-Christian worldview. Does that make sense? There's also the argument for the resurrection, and we'll get a little more detail about the arguments for the resurrection. But the fact that God miraculously raised Jesus from the dead, the most plausible account for that is that God raised him from the dead. All the naturalistic explanations, like, well, he just swooned, he didn't really die on the cross. Well, you must not know much about Roman torture and crucifixion methods to think he survived that after being scourged. Oh, they were just hallucinating. All the disciples were hallucinating. For 40 days, groups of people saw the same person. And they touched him. They ate with him. This guy sounds physical, like he was really there. The naturalistic explanations all fail to explain. It was just a conspiracy. Hey guys, let's get together and see ways that we could get tormented, killed, and made poor. Doesn't that sound like a great conspiracy? And none of us are going to reject that to the point of death. Giving up all earthly goods. These darn Christians, if they would just tell us the real conspiracy. The truth is, he actually rose from the dead. That's the only reason we're going through these things. There's a better thing for us beyond this life. So, the best argument for the resurrection is that God raised Jesus from the dead. If God exists, miracles are possible. For the atheist, and Krista, if you have an atheist friend, this is one of the things that they have to give a more plausible account. They have to give an argument against God's existence. It's not just enough to say God doesn't exist. We can give positive arguments that exist, but the burden of proof isn't only on us. It's also on them. Show why your view is more reasonable. Our view is eminently reasonable. It's actually true. You would expect it to be, because it's true. The best explanation for what happened with Jesus on that day is that God raised Jesus from the dead. Only if they could disprove that God exists can you rule out the fact of miracles. There's also this argument from desire, which I really love. It's one of my favorite arguments for God's existence, though a lot of people don't think it's necessarily persuasive. For me, I think it's terribly persuasive. So I'm a little thirsty right now. There's things that you have, desires like thirst and hunger. And what exists? Knowing that you have that desire, a thirst. Anybody?
Water.
There's things like water that exist that help quench that thirst. I'll drink to that. There's things like food that help the desire you have to eat, right? So that when you have hunger, there's food that'll satisfy your hunger. When you thirst, there's water that'll quench your thirst. It'll satisfy that desire. All these are natural desires. So I also have a desire to dunk a basketball. That's just not going to happen. But this is not something that's a natural desire. Even when I do have my dreams of flying and dunking that basketball still. It's just not going to happen. There's a difference between flying like Superman, being able to leap over tall buildings with a single bound, and natural desires like hunger and thirst. One of the natural desires that God has placed in all of us is you could see it on a lower level in that if you've ever solved a math problem, you've gotten a good grade on a test, you feel really proud. You've come to an answer or something. You desire truth. You like to look at beautiful things. Maybe you like to look at beautiful sunrises or sunsets. It's easier for a lot of us. Not everybody likes to wake up early to see sunrises. You like to see Pilot Mountain, and especially as the leaves are changing in the fall. Maybe you drive up through Virginia to see the beauty there. We have we love the pleasure seeing beautiful things gives us. So truth, we love beauty, and we're satiated in some small way when we behold these things. When we see beautiful acts of goodness, when we see people sacrificing to help those who are suffering from the hurricane, when you help the least of these who are being harmed in our church, who are suffering, and you go and you see these beautiful acts of love, there's something in you like, yes, this is how it should be. All of us recognize in our own hearts that we love what is true and what is good and beautiful, and we encounter finite truths, finite things that are beautiful, but they don't ultimately satisfy. Finite goods also, though we delight in them, they don't ultimately satisfy. There must exist something naturally beyond ourselves in which there's infinite truth and goodness and beauty. And in fact, we say there is. God, the source of all infinite truth, goodness, and beauty. And when you behold the face of God, your cup will be completely filled. You'll be completely satisfied when you see him. This is the argument from desire, which I think is super powerful. And it's one of those things we long for in heaven. It's also one of the reasons why even when you're at home, you don't feel completely at home. You'll only completely rest when you're resting, beholding the face of God. That's the argument for desire. Again, a lot of atheists don't like that so much. I think they're suppressing some evil in their heart, just like the apostle writes about. They're suppressing the truth because of their wickedness. We know the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they proclaim knowledge. There's no speech or language where their voice is not heard. God testifies of himself in all of creation. The fact that he exists, his invisible attributes, his divine nature, his eternal power, can be clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. David writes about this in Psalm 19. Paul writes about this in Romans 1. He writes about the law written on the hearts of man, the natural law, that the Gentiles do by their nature the things in the law. That's the moral law. All right, well, we'll stop with the argument from desire. Let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this class. Thank you for being part of your family, O Lord. I just pray that you give us opportunities to rescue those who are captives of the evil one, Lord. And I just pray that we continue to love our neighbor as you have loved us, O Lord. And guard us, keep us in your care. Help our minds to be sharp and to be bold in our witness for you, O Lord. Help us to love well and always be ready to give a reason for the hope we have with gentleness and respect. Thank you for this community of faith. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sorry, you want to go up there? You want to
Thank you, brother.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to get to all of those two books.
Oh, the Romans 1, 18-20?
No, the two.
Books?
Yeah.
Alright, so welcome here.
Yeah, Paul Copan's series is really great. I think you'll like this author. He's really clear, very easy to access.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I remember hearing this years ago, you're a physicist. Singularity. That's just a fancy word. The math broke down. The math stopped working, and we don't know what we're actually talking about. So we created a fancy word to make it simple.
Because